Happy weekend and Merry Christmas, everyone. We have big news to cover today from CDPR finally admitting that they nerfed Ciri to PS5 Pro, actually turning in a profit. We also have Kadakawa stocks taking a nosedive after disappointing buyout, and Helldivers 2 drama is a never-ending curse. But before we get into that, here's the question of the day. Yes or no? Did you watch Secret Levels yet? And if yes, what is your favorite episode and why? In case you don't know. Amazon Secret Levels is a term often used to describe hidden or lesser-known job levels within Amazon's corporate structure, typically tied to senior positions. These levels go beyond the commonly known levels such as L4 to L7 and include higher-tier positions like L8, L9, and beyond. These roles are usually reserved for very senior leaders, executives, or individuals with a highly specialized skill set, is what ChatGPT said.
Why are you the way that you are? I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
What it really is, Secret Levels is an animated anthology series on Amazon Prime Video, created by Tim Miller, known for Love, Death and Robots, and Deadpool. The show features 15 standalone episodes, each set in the universe of a different video game, such as Warhammer 40,000, Mega Man, Dungeons & Dragons, and Pac-Man. The series showcases a star-studded voice cast, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, Keanu Reeves, Kevin Hart, and Emily Swallow. Secret Level premiered on December 10th, 2024, with the first 8 episodes, followed by the remaining 7 episodes on December 17, 2024. The series has been renewed for a second season. Now I watched the Concord episode. What do I think about it? It's amazing. The characters, the drama, the tension, it was nothing short of amazing. Now, I actually don't remember what the episode was about. I literally zoned out, to be honest with you. To be honest, the Concord short movies are a lot more interesting than that episode, but I want to talk about the coolest one, and that's episode 14. The Way of All Things is based on Honor of Kings, a Chinese 5v5 MOBA mobile game developed by Teamy Studio Group and published by Tencent Games. Akin to League of Legends, Honor of Kings does not explicitly feature narrative and lore elements within its gameplay, but each of its many characters have backstories that are detailed on the game's official website. The Honor of Kings universe is rooted in Chinese mythology, but is augmented with fantasy and sci-fi elements. The Way of All Things features Yixing in the protagonist role. Interestingly, he's not drawn from the existing roster of Honor of Kings heroes. Instead, he's a brand new hero launching simultaneously with this episode, and so the show itself forms Yixing's lore. His battle with Tiangong and the tale of his parents' sacrifice are all new. That's not to say there's nothing more to learn about Yixing, though. As a younger man who had come up against hardships, Yixing was rescued by the Peony Diviner, better known as Ming, another Honor of Kings playable character. The Peony Diviner took Yixing on as an apprentice and taught him many skills, including how to overcome his suffering and manipulate other people. Perhaps the most important thing Ming taught Yixing, though, was how to play the chess-like board game, Weiqi. Over the next few years, Yixing would become a Weiqi prodigy, defeating the masters of Kyokuto. His aptitude for the game is reflected in Yixing's in-game abilities, which are all themed around Weiqi moves and counters. Of course, Yixing's skill for the game would eventually come in very handy for his philosophical encounter with Tiangong. So what was your favorite episode? Arrowhead Games CEO Shams Georgiani has apologized following the recent backlash over Helldivers 2's Killzone crossover pricing, stating that the studio wants to find a sweet spot between content and prices. The Helldivers 2 Killzone crossover launched on December 18th and was quickly met with criticism from fans who complained that the cosmetics were overpriced, especially considering that Helldivers 2 is not a free game. Helldivers 2's Killzone crossover began as a rumor and ultimately became a reality. The crossover features items inspired by the iconic Hellgast aesthetic, including an armor set, an assault rifle, cosmetics, and a community challenge. Along with this, Arrowhead announced the implementation of a new item rotation system to address player concerns about how quickly items disappear. As a result, a second wave of Killzone content is scheduled for the cooperative third-person shooter on December 23rd. Although a crossover with the popular 2009 sci-fi shooter Killzone 2 initially excited fans, the community has expressed dissatisfaction with it. Many players feel that the 1,975 super credits price for Helldivers 2's Killzone crossover, roughly $20, is too steep, especially for a game that isn't free to play. Arrowhead CEO Shams Georgiani responded to the criticism on the Helldivers Discord, saying this was the studio's first big collaboration, and it's still figuring out how to get pricing and content right. He admitted that the pricing was a mistake, explained it had been discussed in a recent team meeting, and assured players that the studio would use feedback to improve future releases. We'd love to find the sweet spot of people loving the content content and the price, Giorgiani said, acknowledging they missed the mark this time. Players have also raised concerns about the crossover items being available for only 5 days before they're removed from the store, creating an unnecessary sense of urgency. Giorgiani admitted that this approach may have played a part in the negative reactions and assured fans the studio plans to adjust in the future. Some players believe this price could have been set by Sony, which owns the Killzone IP, but Arrowhead CCO Johan Pielstedt confirmed on Twitter that Arrowhead was the only one responsible for the decisions. Pielstedt explained that the team's goal was to create content with long-term sustainability in mind. He acknowledged that Helldivers 2's Killzone crossover high prices and limited availability understandably frustrated players. This controversy comes after Helldivers 2 had finally regained its overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam. While Arrowhead has now addressed those issues, it took almost a year to rebuild player trust. It remains to be seen whether the studio can handle the Killzone controversy without further upsetting its player base. So, when Sony dropped the PlayStation 5 Pro a few months ago, a lot of people were like, who's actually going to pay $700 for what's basically a souped-up PS5? Turns out, quite a few people. The initial sales reports show that there's still a good chunk of the gaming community willing to drop serious cash for cutting-edge console graphics. According to Matt Piscatella, an analyst at Circana, the PS5 Pro made up 19% of all PS5 sales in the US during its launch month, November. For context, that's pretty much in line with the PS4 Pro, which accounted for about 20% of total PS4 sales during its run. It's not just the US either. Over in the UK, the PS5 Pro made up 26% of console sales in November. And in Japan, Famitsu reported that the PS5 Pro snagged a whopping 63% of November's PS5 sales, moving 78,000 units in its first week alone. But here's the kicker. Even though unit sales for the PS5 Pro in the US were down about 12% compared to the PS4 Pro's launch back in 2016, the PS5 Pro still made 50% more revenue. Why? Because of that $700 price tag. Back in the day, the PS4 Pro launched at a more wallet-friendly $400, which would be about $533 today. This shows that while the high price might make some people hesitate, it hasn't stopped the hardcore crowd, the folks who need the newest and most powerful hardware, from jumping on it. Sony president Hiroki Totoki even said that the pricing hasn't negatively affected sales so far. He straight up called the PS5 Pro hardcore user hardware, and that's exactly who seems to be buying it right now. That said, it's still early days. Just because the Pro is doing well with early adopters doesn't mean it'll stay that way. Even the Wii U had strong launch sales before it bombed, so who knows how long the demand will last. Plus, there are already signs that Sony might have overestimated the hype. Pre-orders didn't sell out, and scalpers have been struggling to flip their units for profit. Some even took losses. Then there's the fact that a ton of gamers are still rocking their PS4s, and for good reason. The PS5 hasn't exactly blown anyone away with exclusives. Most of its games are still cross-platform, meaning you can play them on the PS4 or even PC with just slightly less graphical oomph. Even with all that, though, it looks like Sony's mid-gen upgrade strategy is working, at least for now. A two-tiered approach makes sense in 2024, where there's clearly a market for people who want premium performance, even if Microsoft isn't interested in the whole incremental hardware thing. Phil Spencer recently said they're not going down that road unless the upgrades deliver a unique experience on screen. But hey, for the folks who shelled out for the PS5 Pro, it seems like having the absolute best console graphics right now is enough of a reason to buy in. Alright, here's the rundown of this Kadakawa-Sony situation. It's wild. So, everyone was expecting Sony to straight up acquire Kadakawa, the media giant behind Elden Ring and a ton of anime IPs. But instead, Sony announced a capital tie-up, investing about $50 billion, around $317 million, to grab a 10% stake in Kadakawa. They're now Kadakawa's top shareholder, but it's far from the full acquisition people were hyped for. And get this, Kadakawa's stock completely tanked after the announcement. It hit its daily limit low, dropping nearly 16%, because the market had been banking on Sony making a tender offer and paying a premium for the shares. On top of that, the private placement means Kadakawa's existing shares are now diluted. Not a great look for shareholders. To put it in perspective, Kadakawa's stock had surged 45% over the past month on acquisition rumors. When those hopes didn't pan out, disappointment hit hard. Hideki Yasuda, an analyst at Toyo Securities, summed it up perfectly. People were expecting a premium, and instead, they got this. That said, there's there's still some big potential here. A Kadakawa acquisition would have been a huge boost for Sony's anime production capabilities and original IP catalog. Kadakawa is massive in the anime and publishing worlds. Even though this isn't a full buyout, analysts like Jefferies' Shunki Nakamura think it could be the first step. He pointed out that this kind of halfway ownership doesn't make a ton of sense unless Sony plans to deepen their collaboration and eventually go for a majority stake. Sony and Kadakawa did say the investment would go toward creating and acquiring new IPs, as well as expanding their global distribution and sales infrastructure. So, while this isn't the all-out acquisition people were hoping for, there's a lot of room for synergy here, especially in anime co-production and distribution. Meanwhile, Sony's shares actually rose slightly after the news, up 0.7% by the end of the day, because, hey, this isn't a full buyout, so they still have capital left to spend on other projects. Traders seem to like that flexibility. It's a pretty interesting situation. While Kadakawa's shareholders might be sulking right now, this partnership could still lead to big moves down the line, especially if Sony decides to up their stake in the future. So, big news from CD Projekt Red. Ciri's teleportation powers are getting seriously toned down, or might even be gone entirely, in The Witcher 4. No more zipping around like some anime powerhouse for our girl Ziriel. Instead, she's stepping up her game as a full-fledged Witcher, complete with the Trial of the Grasses, potion chugging, and some beefed-up magical abilities that'll blow Geralt's signs out of the water. In an interview with Games Radar, executive producer Malgorzata Matrenga touched on this big change. She admitted there's a gap between how insanely overpowered Ciri was at the end of The Witcher 3 and the more grounded version of her we saw in the trailer for The Witcher 4. When asked about the reason behind the shift, Matrenga cryptically said, "Something totally happened in between." She added, "We had to dig deep to figure out how to handle this. We have massive respect for the lore, both from the books and our previous games. But this was one of the first questions we answered, and it's what helped us craft this original story for The Witcher 4. What's replacing the teleportation?" According to Matrenga, Ciri's still got that speed and agility, and she's definitely got the Witcher instincts Geralt instilled in her. On top of that, her magic is getting a serious upgrade. The flashy power she used in the trailer to zap a monster is apparently a new spell called Bolt. Definitely sounds like her toolkit is leveling up in a different direction. Game director Sebastian Kalemba shared a bit more with Eurogamer, saying the team worked hard to make Ciri's depowering feel natural and tied it directly to the story. "We can't tell you exactly how," he teased, "but we solved it. Trust us, you'll get a clear answer when you experience the game." Honestly, I'm on board with this approach. Don't get me wrong, I loved Ciri's story arc in The Witcher 3, but her playable segments, with all the teleporting, always felt a bit too slippery and ungrounded for me. Great for the story, but not my favorite gameplay-wise. The idea of Ciri as more of a spells ward is intriguing. Geralt's signs in The Witcher 3 were always meant to be situational tricks, but with the right build, they turned into something much bigger. Remember the flamethrower Igni or frost-boosted Ard? And Erden's alternate turret mode was an absolute game changer. Now imagine Ciri's magic getting that kind of depth. Sounds incredible. As for how she lost her teleportation powers, it could be anything. Maybe she gave them up voluntarily after the events with the White Frost. Maybe they faded naturally. Or maybe some shady villain sapped them away. But although there are people out there who find it controversial for a beautiful woman to slay moldy undead monsters, developer CD Projekt Red maintains it's what's best for their story. I think there's many very valid worries and responses, narrative director Philip Weber tells Eurogamer in a recent interview, because I think a lot of them come out of passion. Weber also emphasizes that CD Projekt Red is beholden to the lore, the canon of the books by Andrzej Sapkowski, the 3 previous Witcher games, and we'd want to take that seriously, and we really want to respect that. In the Witcher novels, Ciri is trained as a Witcher, and is so powerful and prominent, some fans have wondered why she isn't widely considered to be the series' main character. In allowing Ciri to be the main focus of another Witcher adaptation, something the Witcher TV show has already done, The Witcher 4 falls perfectly in line with the narrative laid out by Sapkowski's fantasy books. We're not suddenly making up stuff just because we want to, Weber continues. I could make games about Geralt until the day I die, and I would probably die happy. But I think for me, and I think for all of us, at CD Projekt Red, it's also just really exciting to see all the opportunities that Ciri brings us. If you want to be ahead of all the gaming leaks and news, specifically PlayStation news, time for you to subscribe. And as always, a like on the video is very much appreciated.